Today, I'm honored to introduce you to Alex Sterner, a husband, father to an adorable 15-month-old boy, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, strength coach to some of the world's greatest Jiu-Jitsu athletes, and one of the best no BS fitness content creators. Alex is brilliant, articulate, and has earned my utmost respect. He works relentlessly hard to provide free, helpful, and encouraging content to help people get stronger, build muscle, improve their athletic performance, and become confident pushing themselves beyond what they believe is possible. This is my first time meeting Alex in person, and I'm blessed to have him here on the show. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Man, I hope I could live up to that.
I hope so too.
It's quite neat, though.
So, who are you?
Who am I? Yeah, man, I really like helping people achieve what they're capable of in the weight room. I have a personal passion for jiu-jitsu, which I've had the blessing of like blending what I do with work. So yeah, it's really just a matter of building a life around those two things that I've had as a passion for a really long time, and trying to have as positive of an impact as I can with as many people as possible along the way.
What misconceptions do people have about you?
About me?
Mm-hmm.
Man. That I don't lift. I think you know, the frame on Instagram can be a little bit brutal. Mm-hmm. And my proportions might not be that of like the typical fitness influencer, mm-hmm. right? I think people are bombarded with a specific like image of people on TRT at the age of 29, or, you know, people that are strictly in the bodybuilding space. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of a stigma against people who don't look the part, mm-hmm. right?
I relate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but like so many good coaches can very much still have that as a huge part of their life. Mm-hmm. Like I lift probably too often, you know?
And you are wildly strong. It takes one scroll through your Instagram profile and people can follow you in the show notes. One look to watch you search your squat, watch you deadlift. Like you're wildly, wildly strong. And if anyone decides to roll with you and train jiu-jitsu, they're going to feel your grip and be like, oh, never mind. This guy lifts.
Yeah, for sure. You know, that's not something that I would say that I carry all that much. It's just something that you're sort of reminded with a lot, right? So like, I think for any sort of misconception, that'd probably be it.
And people message you about it and leave comments.
Oh God, all the time.
Yeah.
We were talking about it earlier where, yeah, sometimes you just wake up and the first thing you see is a message. Sometimes they're even trying to be nice. They're like, wow, you're stronger than you look. And my eye kind of twitches, you know?
What's something you used to believe, but you no longer do?
I'd say the big one is I used to buy into the Glassback propaganda. I used to think that lifting with a neutral spine was correct, that you were playing with fire if you loaded movements with any intentional or unintentional flexion or extension. Yeah, and it forced me into a box. And it's been liberating over the last, I'd say, 5 years or so. I've really embraced like that movement optimism type of mentality, where if you have a natural range, why not load it? Be sensible about your progression, focus on load management. But there is no inherently, if your body has access to a range, there is not a great reason not to load that to some degree. And it's funny, that idea was actually like planted in my mind by my dad. When I think I was still in school or just out of school, and I was lifting with him, and I gave him some correction about whether it was his elbow, like drifting out as he's pressing, or maybe his knee dipped in a lunge or something. And I was like, oh, don't do that. You're going to get hurt. And in between sets, he was like, well, if that's a position that hurts people, wouldn't it make sense to train it? And I remember like, man, being floored by that. And I gave him some BS, like biomechanical, whatever, you know, knee valgus and ACL tears, whatever nonsense I gave him. But man, it stuck with me. Like that not only, it was such a tiny part of one workout that I had with him one day. And that stuck with me. And it was a question I couldn't really answer. Sure, I gave my canned response from the things that I'd learned and like the safety and training that I had constructed in my mind, but there wasn't a good answer. I could not, in good faith, be like, I know what you're saying. Common misconception. Let me break it down to you. I was actually like, that's such a good question. And it wasn't until I made this full shift. I actually told him about it one time. Maybe 5 or so years ago. And he was like, I don't remember saying that. He's like, I'm pretty smart though, right? But yeah, man, it sort of ate away at me for a long time because I couldn't answer that. You know, and it is such, if we believe in what we do, if we believe that loading tissue leads to positive adaptation, right? And there's a million examples that it does. There's even counterexamples. There's studies that are done in space or on the ISS that show rapid degeneration of the spine in the absence of loading, right? Our body craves that. Of course it has to be in the right dosage. Of course you can still get hurt if you overdo it, right? But if we believe that loading a bicep curl through a full range is beneficial and results in beneficial adaptation of the biceps tendon, of the associated ligaments, bones, everything, then why does that logic stop with something like the spine or like a deep knee bend or whatever context we might feel apprehensive about it? Why? Why is that unique? Why would we believe that concept doesn't apply there? And I think this is like the expansion of what that question did to me, you know, over time, because I'm like, okay, so I believe in this here. Why is it different here? And the fact of the matter is, it really isn't. Of course, just like with training people of different ages, maybe your rate of change will be different. Maybe due to somebody's history, you're not going to progress that loaded flexion as quickly as something else, right? There's a million different nuances and ways that you could be more cautious with it. But the goal is to train. And if we're training, if we're loading tissue, if we're looking for those positive adaptations, there isn't some magical degree that then becomes bad for everybody. And I think that's the biggest. Of course, there's like lots of small misconceptions I've had along the way, but that was really central. You know, that was something that I believed. I had a very Disney-esque classification of right and wrong techniques, safe and unsafe motions, and things like that. And as you learn more, as you get more experience, but also just read more, pay attention to different sports, pay attention to, everything that's out there in the realm of human movement, you find that it's not so black and white. If it was, we would have solved like major injuries in the NBA and everything else a long time ago. Would have been like, okay, move just like this. You'll never get hurt. And then everyone will have a career like LeBron, right? But yeah.
You and I were brought up, we're both 34. We came up in the same industry, probably followed many of the same people. And we were told, you don't round your back. You don't let your knees cave in. You don't let your arm, and I know we were talking about it a little bit last night. It's like, when you're learning from someone that you really respect, often you just take it at face value. Like, okay, well, this person's really smart and this person taught me that, so that must be true. So I went through something very similar, which is like, oh, maybe that's not accurate. Maybe they were wrong about that. I was going to bring it up later, but since you already mentioned it within the first couple minutes, I have to ask, what is a glassback?
Okay, that's a great question. So also piggybacking off of one of our conversations, I think there's useful ways to get people's attention. I think there is value. It's funny. I'm gonna sort of divert this a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
We've also had conversations about people who are charlatans, people who unethically share information online, and they've got very common practices, universal practices, and strategies that they use to really grab people's attention and rope them in. And instead of just looking at that like a negative thing, like I have in the past, I am just sort of curiously breaking it down now. What are the things that are drawing people in? Why are they attracted to this flame? What can I co-opt and do so ethically for a much more positive benefit? And one of those things is having like an in-group and an out-group, right? And I think there's there's ways you can do it where it's really serious, like a cult. And that's obviously not such a good thing. But I think there's ways you can sort of playfully do it and have like an inside joke. And you've got the people with the inside joke and the people that aren't yet accustomed to it. And the Glassback is like the movement optimism / like learn how to deal with injuries in group. Yeah. And so essentially, what is a Glassback? It is a Glassback is not just someone whose back hurts, right? I had a back pain flare up like a month ago. And I would not consider myself a Glassback. A Glassback is somebody who has fear from a negative experience that they had, but they take it to another level. And because that fear is normal, right? You touch a hot stove, you're like, man, I don't want to do that again. Normal. It's when you get evangelical with that fear and you look to place that fear on others. And it gets to a point where a lot of these people that I would call like textbook Glassbacks, they actually list off their negative experiences as if it's like a CV, as if it's a reason that you should believe, well, I've had this injury and this injury. Trust me, you don't want to go down that path, right? And they take this very sage approach, like I can see into your future because I'm living it. I'm further down this path. And if you don't listen to me, you're going to end up like me. So I think it's much more a mindset. And it's funny, last night we were also talking about like CLA, the constraint-led approach to skill acquisition or learning. And a central part of a lot of the books on CLA are that our environment is shaped by our sense of self-efficacy. And I think this is also a very therapeutic way to look at whether it's a charlatan, somebody, that leads like a movement cult, or someone who is like really, really fearful. Someone who goes, oh man, my knee hurts just looking at that on a video, right? What that is somebody admitting their lack of self-efficacy in that moment, or someone in a movement cult breaking down how you can move perfectly to never get injured. That person has a very fearful and pessimistic view on movement. And they've built an entire, like sometimes ideology to support that frailty. So I think understanding that all of us are shaped by that self-efficacy, like what we think we can do affects how we interact with the world. It's crazy. In that book I was referring to, they actually they bring up studies where your sense of self-efficacy actually affects your sensory environment.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but like it's wild when you look at some of these examples. So one of the ones that I think is crazy because it's so universally understood. They take a large number of people at the bottom of a staircase.
Okay.
And they ask them to estimate the slope of the stairs. The fitter and stronger the person is, the less steep they estimate it to be.
That's incredible.
The weaker and less mobile they are, the steeper. So literally their sensory environment, looking at a staircase, they go, oh, that's steep. That is actually them admitting something about themselves. And our sensory environment is shaped by that. There's information on climbers showing that the better a climber is, the larger the fit. If they estimate the size of a hold, they'll say it's bigger than it really is because they're so capable that it's obvious to them. And the reverse is true. Someone who is not a very good climber, you ask them how big that crimp hold is, they're going to say it's smaller than it really is. There's studies on baseball players when you're asking them to hit it. Man, I would mess up the specifics here, but you ask them to hit it to left field, and it's in a part of the strike zone where it's tough to hit it in that direction, they'll say the ball is smaller. And when the ball is in the place that makes it easy to place, to hit it to that part of the field, they'll say the ball looked bigger. So when we start to recognize that, we don't take this like objective measurement of our reality around us, and our sensory environment is affected by it, of course, how we view other people moving is also going to be affected by that. And yeah, when someone comments, my knees hurt just looking at that, it's never a gymnast. It's never someone super capable, right? So yeah, I think being able to view people's opinions on things like that as sort of a little bit of projecting, right? Like they're not capable of doing that
Yet.
yet. Exactly. And taking something like the name Glassback and having sort of like an inside joke about that, and also explain, like, people will be like, oh, my back hurt last week. Does that make me are you calling me a Glassback? I'm like, I don't know. Are you going around online telling people not to do stuff? Because if that's the case, you are a Glassback. And I think that it's also just a very beneficial way to look at injury. Very few injuries are a life sentence. Though we'll like catastrophize something that is a relatively minor injury that we could go back on 6 months later. You could be like, oh yeah, that wasn't such a big deal. But in those couple days, you're talking to everybody that you know. My life is over. I'm never training jiu-jitsu again, or I'm never playing golf again, whatever it is. And I think it's very valuable to know that the human body is super adaptable, super like capable of incredible feats of healing. And that if we just you'll ride the initial wave of that emotion, but ride it back down to get back to baseline, assess where you're at, and just focus on taking that next step. I think it's super valuable. And then you'll see those traits within yourself. You won't feel the need to press that fear on others to make yourself feel better. And you'll feel more capable. And when an injury happens, it won't throw your life into a downward spiral. You'll feel capable. You'll feel confident in the fact that you can deal with that injury. And for whatever reason, I think the back is the most common area that we'll see that type of mentality. Of course, you see it for other joints. I mentioned the knee and stuff, but the back is the most common. And I think it's very empowering to help people break that fear down, to challenge that fear, to get them to feel more confident and empowered in their ability to move. And like literally, dude, we're vertebrates. Like, act like it.
Yeah.
I think it's super important.
Glassback, it seems to me like it's a mentality.
For sure.
It's a mentality of, if I move this way, my back will break.
Right.
And they're often told it is. They're told their spine will explode out of their back if they round over when they do a deadlift, if they do a Jefferson curl, God forbid. And going back to your original point, if you have the range, why not train it? We could even take it further to the idea of, if you want the range, you have to train it. Never mind getting stronger within your current range, but if you want to achieve a bigger range of motion, how are you going to achieve that range? How are you going to get that level of mobility and strength within that range if you don't push it? So it seems to me, and what I love about what you do is you're changing people's fear. They have this fear of hurting their back, and so they don't move it, which then leads to degeneration, and then it probably leads to more injury, and then God forbid if they do get injured, which we all do, injury is going to happen to everybody. How do you respond to that injury? Do you respond?
Are you paralyzed by it?
Yeah,
like, by fear, or do you take it in stride and learn from it?
Yeah, and we don't want to be a Glassback.
Right.
We don't want to have that fear. And it doesn't just apply to backs, and it could even apply to everything in life. Not even just like whether it's being a husband, being a wife, being a business owner. Once you have a failure, how do you respond to it? Are you glass? Are you going to shatter? Or are you going to be more anti-fragile?
Yep. I was going to mention that exact term.
Yeah. Which is like, I love, that's one of my favorite books of all time. With the idea that when people think of when we look at the example in the book, there's a vase. The vase breaks. Imagine if you just put it back together normally, like you glue it together, it might be now more fragile because you had to put it back together. It doesn't have the original stability. But what if every time the vase breaks, it makes it more difficult to break it? And it's like, if you have that mentality around your body and injury, that every time something bad happens, you use it as an opportunity to make yourself more resilient, more difficult to break, then you're going to be able to push yourself. And that's why I deliberately said it in the introduction. You inspire people and help people become stronger and perform better than they thought was possible. And a lot of that is not through the exercises you show, but more about the mentality that you bring to your content, teaching people this isn't a life sentence. This isn't a bad movement. We can actually train it to make you better than you've ever thought possible, which is one of the reasons why I love what you do.
Thank you.
we're going out of order from what I had planned, but I want to sort of stay on this glass back. I want to stay on this spine injury, this back injury, because back injuries are very, very common. You had said something, and I want to see if it was in your content, but you had mentioned there's a very underrated or overlooked way to improve spine health and reduce your risk of a back injury. And you could ask me one question, I'll give you 100 different answers in 100 different days. But you were referencing research on this. I'm wondering, like, if you had to look at a very overlooked way to improve spine health and reduce your risk of back injury, what are some of the ways that you would discuss?
I think I know the exact post you're talking about. But yeah, cardio. And there are modalities of cardio that seem to provide a pretty unique stimulus. And there's pretty robust data on both rowing and running. The running data is solid. It's over a relatively long period of time. I want to say 5 or 10 years. And they show that running can preserve the thickness of the discs. Some people will sort of theorize that that's due to the impact, which is another thing that gets a huge bad reputation,
Yep.
right? People, low impact exercise, as if that's a good thing. Impact is just another stressor.
Yes.
And it's so valuable in the spine. It's valuable in the knees. It's valuable for so many different things. So yeah, I think cardio is huge. I also think for our athletes, cardio is huge for back health. The amount of people who train something like jujitsu and that injury happens in the last round of the day. Mm-hmm. They are protected, they're strong when they're fresh, but as they get depleted, they get to a point where they can wind up in a position where they're far more compromised, and that's where the injury happens. So I think it's actually pretty multifaceted. I also think that it's really cool seeing certain people nowadays really pushing back into cardio. Mm-hmm. For a long time, we could speculate as to what the reasons are, maybe just the popularity of bodybuilding, how appealing the aesthetics of bodybuilding or building muscle are. But when it boils down to it, cardio is such a valuable thing for longevity. It's a valuable thing as it translates to sport. It's a valuable thing when it comes to bouncing back from an injury. And there seem to be some potential protective benefits for the spine in and of those activities themselves. So yeah, I think rowing or running are great things that you can do for back health. And I like to look at it from a holistic perspective, right? Because you've got people all the time that will, maybe on their journey, they just really haven't loaded the spine. They're dealing with back pain, whatever, and then they do deadlifts and they're good, right? And for them, that's great. They found where they had a deficit, they filled that hole and saw a huge improvement in quality of life. Then you got someone else, maybe they're preaching that, and someone else being like, dude, I deadlift all the time and my back still hurts. I think it's important to have, when we're looking at something as multivariable and complex as back pain, that could have so many different contributing factors, triggers, etc., I like to address it in as many ways as possible. Okay, cool. You've been doing your deadlifts. So we probably don't have anything left to squeeze there. Mm-hmm. What are those other things? And a lot of times within the gym community, especially males, if we're looking at the average male gym goer who is doing some of the stuff for back health, but still has persistent pain, they probably don't do cardio. Mm-hmm. And again, even just in the realm of load management, when they are in the midst of a flare-up, are there ways that you can still train and improve and feel really good without just pressing the same button over and over again? Like maybe turn up your cardio for a little bit, focus a little bit more on that, and de-emphasize some of that lifting, right? Maybe it's not appropriate in the midst of that flare-up to just keep loading the crap out of those structures. Maybe you lack the discipline to load it appropriately, right? You're trying to load your squats to where you feel a quad pump, and when your back is the limiting factor, it keeps leading you into this vicious cycle. A lot of times changing your gears and training a little bit differently, especially if it's like an untapped well for you, can be so valuable. So I think it's very valuable to point out those other things that people might not think. Like they think traditional strength and rehab for the back, and that'll encompass, moving in all three planes. ideally loading in all three planes. Potentially, I think another one that we haven't talked about and that I didn't mention in that post is adding velocity to some of those movements. How often does someone sneeze and hurt their back?
Yes.
Or like, man, one of the worst times I threw out my neck. I've had a history with roommates of us scaring each other. And I won't get into too many specifics, but essentially, I always tend, it escalates and then they get me really, really bad. And one of these times, a friend of ours was visiting, and I didn't even know that she was out. You know, I had a couple of roommates at the time, and they were like, as I was at work, they're like, "Oh, hurry up and get back. We're gonna go to the beach together, whatever." I'm like, "All right, cool." I get home, I'm in a rush. They're like, "Go grab your stuff, whatever." I go into my room, open my closet, and she's just in the closet.
Oh my gosh.
And I jumped like so fast and like pulled something in my neck, right? And it's great. Like the rest of the trip, she's out here. I'm like moving around, like I'm wearing the old Batman mask.
Yeah.
But yeah, velocity can be a trigger for back pain a lot of times as well. And a lot of the movements that people traditionally do in the weight room involve slower tempos, higher loading, which is valuable. Don't get me wrong, but there's like that untapped potential in terms of training plyos or rotational med ball throws. A lot of these motions that all of a sudden then they go golfing and they twinge it. You're just not getting exposures to that speed, to that velocity for months at a time. Then the weather's nice, you go golfing, you rotate rapidly for the first time in 6 months, and you can't walk for 2 days, right? So again, there are a lot of different ways we can look at this, and velocity is another one of those. A lot of people feel pressured. I hear this a lot from my online clients and the people that I program for remotely. When they're in a regular gym, they feel weird jumping. Right? Most people are just doing their lifts. They feel like everyone's watching them. They feel like they're the odd one out. And it's kind of crazy, right? Like as a kid, how many times do your kids jump in a day?
All the time. Constantly.
All the time.
I jump more now that I have kids.
It's crazy, right? And if you were to just take the average 10-year-old and we put a body cam on them and counted how many times they jumped in one day, like it's such a high number. And then we get to roughly high school age and never jump again. And it so much so that in a place that is, its only purpose is for us to develop our bodies, in that place, it's still weird for people to be jumping. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, due to all of these different reasons, people just stop moving quickly. And then when inevitably they have to, when someone's hiding in their closet and they get scared and they have to react, the body might respond by sending that pain response. So velocity is another one that I think is really important.
One thing that I like that you do about the spine is you relate it to other tissues in the body, to other, whether it's muscles or bones, tendons, ligaments. And for some reason, people just don't look at the spine the same way as they do literally every other aspect of the body. And when we're looking at like back pain, for example, and we're looking at someone in the gym who might be deadlifting or doing back extensions or whatever it is, they feel like they're training their back to be strong and pain-free, but they're still struggling with it. If we're going to use the bicep curl example, you would never just do one exercise to grow your biceps or to get stronger with your biceps. You would do multiple different ones. You would change the angle. You would change the set and repetition scheme. You would change the velocity. There are many things you do if you want to get, sometimes you might do isometric. Sometimes you might do lower weight, higher reps. Sometimes you might do reverse curls. Sometimes you might do hammer curls. Like you would train it from a variety of angles, with a variety of loads and intensities and speeds in order to get the most out of that one muscle group. But with the spine, people are like, well, I'm deadlifting and doing 45-degree hyperextensions, whatever. It's like, okay, but are you doing any lower load, longer duration stuff, whether it's jogging or walking or rowing, things that train the spine? Inherently, you have to. Like, it's very hard not to, but you're training the spine, you're getting this impact, which that for me is one of the biggest issues. Is everything is about low impact now. It's a huge, like, I need low impact. Do you, or do you actually need maybe a little bit more impact? It's like, would that be better for you? Or would that add something that you haven't trained. And that might actually be something that helps you not only from a physiological perspective, but also from a psychological perspective. If you're told you need low impact, and then God forbid you do something that isn't low impact, like
you stumble.
Exactly.
That's an impact.
Yes.
You stumble and you stick your leg out. That is an impact, sometimes a significant one.
Yes.
You know? Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? So I think we see these two extremes in the fitness industry. You've got the people that are so wrapped up in the all-inclusive fitness lifestyle that they lose perspective to the everyday person and they refuse to meet them where they're at. And they think that they need to move. If someone's overall, let's just break down their health to like a 3, instead of being like, okay, how do I get this person to a 4 first and then move them onwards to a 7 and 8, right? They're just immediately like, nope, change everything about your life, right?
Yes.
And they're a bit disconnected. But then we also have a group of people or content that panders to meeting people where they're at so much that it lacks progression, which should be the heart of what we do. And I think things marketed as low impact is an example of that. I think a lot of things marketed as longevity training is an example of that. It's so accessible early on, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but then it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that there's something wrong with that as well, because I view injury and aging very similarly in the sense that the average person thinks they're powerless to both. And yes, I mean, overwhelmingly, you will get injured and you will age. So I'm not trying to be any sort of like lunatic that claims that those things don't happen. But that doesn't mean that we're powerless to those things. That doesn't mean that we can't decrease the rate of injury. That doesn't mean that we can't hold off aging with a stick and preserve qualities like velocity that tend to slope off rapidly with age. And I think the feeling of having control over those things is from the progressive element of training. So when we lack that progress, that person still feels frail and fragile, and they feel like if an injury happens, they're screwed, and they feel like, as you know, they're aging at the same rate they were before they did this accessible training, and they don't feel like they can really preserve anything, right? They get stuck in like fitness purgatory of just these low impact modalities. And they become afraid of impact. And if you remove impact from your life for long enough, that's going to become such a novel stimulus that something like stumbling and regaining your balance might actually be injury inducing in and of itself. And I think that's sad too. I think that there is an art form to meeting someone where they're at, to not get so lost in our own perspectives that we can't do that. But then also a huge part of being a coach, and I feel kind of flattered by how you worded it earlier on about how I try to show people that they're stronger than they would have ever thought. But that's such a valuable thing too. I thought I was being funny one time, and I still kind of think it's funny, which is why I'm bringing it up. But I made a post once that had way more backlash than I thought.
That's always fun when that happens. Like,
it is.
In your mind, you're like, this is going to be great. And then people are like, you're an asshole.
Yeah. I was probably like on the toilet and I'm like, this is the best idea ever. And it was just a post saying my favorite part of being a strength coach is gaslighting people into achieving their goals.
I love that.
Which I thought it was good. Obviously, I'm not saying gaslighting is a good thing. And I'm not trying, like, for anybody listening, I'm not trying to make light of scenarios where gaslighting is awful and it puts them into this vicious cycle. However, if we look at the relationship between a coach and a client and massaging an idea into shape where they're able to do something that if you interviewed them on day one, they were like, I will never do that. There's elements of coercion and persuasion and manipulation almost.
Dude,
it's for a positive outcome. Yeah,
yes.
And again, like manipulation or gaslighting has this negative connotation. And coercion,
manipulation can be used in a positive way.
Right.
It absolutely can be.
Right.
Like if you have someone who doesn't believe in themselves and you talk to them in a way that makes them believe themselves, you are. What is motivational interviewing? You're manipulating the conversation to get the individual to come up with a plan to help them do what maybe they didn't think they could do before. It's about your intent, not necessarily just the strategy that you're using.
Right. Right. And I think the psychological side is huge. I think I forget exactly what you said earlier, but I wanted to comment on nocebos, right? And we're so familiar with the placebo effect. But there's crazy data examining the strength of the placebo effect. The placebo effect is actually so regularly mentioned that I think people forget just how powerful it is. And that's why when something is a placebo-controlled study, it's so valuable. There was a study out of Japan, I believe, where they took 20 participants, they applied an inert leaf to one forearm, and like essentially it's like poison ivy. It has oils on it that gives them a rash to their other one. And it's 20 people who were super allergic and respond to that leaf. And they told them the opposite.
No way.
And all 20 developed a rash.
Shut up.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Then there's also
on the side where the inert leaf was.
On the side where
the actual poison ivy hit.
I mean, that's still poison ivy. Yeah. But they developed a rash out of the belief. They're told by these sciencey people that we're applying this to your arm. And they're like, man, every time I've ever touched that, this happens.
That's wild.
It's crazy. And then there's like the classic one in strength and conditioning where they gave people sugar pills and told them that they were anabolics, and they saw more growth. And then I think I could be wrong on this, but I think one of those groups, they then even told them partway through what they were doing, and their progress sloped off. They're like, damn it. I thought this was the good stuff. So we look at the placebo effect, but the nocebo effect, man, we're just so shaped by the things that go on in here, right? And I think any denial of that in a coaching context is doing a disservice to the person that you're coaching.
Can you explain nocebo for people who don't know?
Yeah, the nocebo is just the inverse of that. So if I told you, especially, if you trusted me, if we're in a relationship where I'm your coach and I tell you this is bad, right? Like, let's say I could have done that with jujitsu last night, right? I could have been like, oh man, you play De La Riva? Bro, everyone passes De La Riva. De La Riva is a free pass position. Your De La Riva would get worse from that conversation.
100%.
And that conversation alone. You would get there and my annoying voice would be there being like, Jordan, everyone passes De La Riva. And you'd be like, oh, and your attacks are going to have less oomph to them, right? This is an ever-present thing in our lives. And I think being aware of it just allows us to better navigate these things. But the nocebo effect is everywhere. People telling you, this is dangerous, this is bad. You go into that thing, whatever outcome you have in your mind becomes slightly, but statistically more likely to happen. And again, I think we should just be aware of that. So the nocebo effect, I try very hard, and it's funny because when I do stuff that is on the subject of something like movement optimism, all the time you got people being like, oh, it's irresponsible to tell people they won't get hurt, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, if you read my captions and stuff, I'm always talking about load management, how any form of intense training has risks. There's an injury risk. If you're doing something that's going to elicit adaptation, there's risk to that. But I think only focusing on those risks creates a really you develop a fear that's not relative to the actual risk. Humans are terrible at interpreting and calculating risk anyways. How many people do you know that are deathly afraid of flying on an airplane, but drive their car with no problem?
Right.
Right?
They're more likely to die going to the airport than they are on the plane.
Exactly. And those fears in general tend to not be that rational. So if you're stoking those fears, take someone who's already scared of flying on a plane and show them a report of all of the 747 errors in the malfunctions in the last year, they're going to be more fearful for that. You're going to really entrench them with that fear. And I think a lot of people play into that because fear is powerful. Emotions, anytime you can evoke emotions in your audience, you are in some way attaching them to you. And if I just wanted to do that and wasn't aware of it or had no ethics or whatever, fear is a great way to do that. So you entrench people in these fears. especially, you know, in the realm of what we do, anything that has a risk, you could go down the list. But yeah, I mean, heavy loading is like an easy target because you can find people using heavy loads and getting hurt. But you can also talk to 4 people around you, and people could also mention how they got hurt tying their shoes once, right? Like, there are counterexamples, but we can really paint a target if we want to. And then if someone already had a little bit of that fear, or maybe they even didn't, maybe you totally planted that seed and then watered it, and they then go into a setting where they are going to lift heavy or do whatever the activity is that you've nurtured that fear, they're actually more likely to encounter that negative event now because of how they're approaching it. Just like you with De La Riva, if I talked a bunch of crap, but you should play De La Riva, by the way. But yeah, if you went into that, like, you would get past more. The thing you're worried about would happen more. So I think it's important, of course, when possible, when you have a more long form opportunity, dive into the nuance, explain that both ends exist and that there's an interplay between them. When you're talking about just one side, just be very careful when we're talking about the negative side, the one that may play into some of those fears. I think you have a degree of responsibility when you're talking about that, to not be over dramatic, to not play it up, and be aware of the fact that people who follow you or clients of yours trust you, and they are opening themselves to that knowledge. And if you overplay the negatives on something, you could have a very significant and negative effect on that person's life. So yeah,
I think, and you and I are acutely aware of this because so much of what we do is on social media. I'm always trying to help people understand, why are you seeing the posts that you're seeing on social media? Like, why did this video come up out of the literal millions and millions of posts that were posted today over the last week? Why is this one on your feed? And the algorithm doesn't work the way that it used to anymore. It's not like you're only seeing posts from people you follow. You're not only seeing posts based on like the time that it was posted. You're seeing it based on engagement. You're seeing it based on how, quote unquote, well is this doing? How long are people watching it? How many people are sharing it?
but also on your own actions.
Exactly. And so if you're seeing a post, I think you have to understand that the creator made that post for a very specific reason. And oftentimes, in regard to the nocebo and fear-inducing, they know that a post that inspires fear in someone will likely do better. So they might play it up, specifically, not because they even believe it. Maybe they do, but maybe they'll make that post not because they believe it, but because I want more engagement, I want more views, I want more clients. So I'm going to make this out to be far more dangerous than it really is, solely to get more people to follow me, solely to get more potential online coaching client requests, which is, as the consumer of content, so important to be aware of, being like, is there nuance in this? Is what I'm seeing like very black and white? This is bad. And if that's what's being told to me, how can I be a more critical thinker and be like, maybe there's more to this than what's being told, so that I can have a better understanding of how I can actually apply this, or even if it's worth applying.
Man, I think that's huge. I think that an awareness to help navigate these spaces is like step one. That's your foundation. Yeah, I think it's something that I'm so aware of. You know, we were talking about sensitive geopolitical topics last night, and I was explaining how, with myself, I don't really have much of that framework to navigate that. So I can at least fall back on, I don't have strong opinions here because I haven't successfully navigated that. I've seen extreme opinions, but I know enough to be like, I don't know, that seems kind of really far on one side to me.
Yeah.
You know, and like that framework you were saying, I can look at it and be like, that seems a little too extreme to be true, or to encapsulate the truth in its entirety, to do it justice. But yeah, I think, man, it's super common. I have clients in person and online, but in person is such a common thing to be like, I don't know who to listen to. You know, I don't know. Everyone makes it sound so good, but yeah, a framework like that of like, is someone explaining both sides of the issue, or are they just really pushing that one? And I do also think that long form helps with that, because sometimes just working within the platform. I actually, I took it as a cool challenge. You challenged a follower.
I was going to bring this up.
It was like a year ago, and it was at a point in time where I was trying to practice talking heads. And you told this person, you're like, oh, you were talking about creatine.
Yep.
Which, by the way, even though I tell people to take creatine, I agree with you that it is overblown.
I want to talk about this because I think this is a really important discussion. And anyway, I made a post talking about creatine, how like it has benefits, but also like if you're not strength training, if you're not getting your sleep, if your nutrition sucks, like don't expect it to magically improve every aspect of your life. And the other side of it is I very much view my job on social media is to like act as a shield and like almost like trying to bring the pendulum from swinging so far. And I'm seeing so many coaches being like creatine. I'm like, you spent like 6 posts out of your last 20 talking about creatine, and you haven't once mentioned like walking. You haven't once mentioned getting your sleep in check. You're not giving practical tips. You're just giving creatine with your affiliate code for your creatine.
Yep.
So that's my nuance and context to it. But then someone was like, well, you could have mentioned like the ATP cycle of understanding how creatine actually works. I was like, if you can do this in a 60-second reel and make it super informative and nuanced, then I'll post it on my page. That person didn't reply, but you took it up as a challenge and you made a great reel about it. So like talk about your side of this.
Yeah. So first off, I really like the stance and the overall context that you're taking with creatine. I think we live in a day and age where we are not lacking for information, but where the average person is hugely lacking is just what part of that information to focus on. You know, you got people just getting into cardio for the first time. And another thing that I love about Alec Blennis and his platform, you know, people really tunnel visioning on like their heart rate content. And he's like, dude, I do all of these crazy endurance events at a super high level. And I just go, yeah, today was kind of hard. Like that, there's some value in knowing what to focus on. And in the average person's journey, if they're focusing on creatine, it's probably an overemphasis and they're probably missing out on some really tangible things. I even think with people who are advanced, and this is something that I like to keep into perspective with people. If you took a random one workout, let's say, so interestingly enough, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've very consistently like been on like a structured creatine regimen, and I even worked my way up to like 10 grams a day.
Oh wow!
I felt like there was a benefit, especially at my body weight for that. But and in the last month, due to I got sick, then my son got sick, then the wedding, the honeymoon, I got derailed, and I'm not currently taking creatine. And if I looked at one of my workouts, or if you transported me to a time where I was taking creatine and said, all right, your life is on the line. Were you taking creatine during this session or not? Bro, don't lie to me. I would have no idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't make that big of a difference. So like that's important. The magnitude is important as well.
Yeah.
The magnitude is not massive. However, for those who are putting a lot of time in and they're trying to claw and scrape for every little bit of progress, yeah, dude, add creatine. Very affordable. I don't have an affiliate code. I think there's one on Amazon that's like the cheapest creatine monohydrate you could get your hands on. You get that. It comes out to, it's something crazy like 24 cents per 5 gram.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And just, that's an easy thing that they can add in at that appropriate time.
Great. There's also if I'm going to like steel man my own argument, which is going to the study that you cited around people taking this placebo and being told that it's steroids. It's like, okay, maybe you like tell people the truth. Like it statistically it's unbelievable. It's like the most researched supplement in the fitness industry. It's overwhelmingly safe and it is effective. And if people start taking it and that makes them get in the gym more, push harder,
or just go to the gym with that intent, like, hell yeah, dude,
I'm gonna push. I'm on creatine. You know, it's like maybe it's worthwhile. But then you run into it's like, okay, did I play it up so much that now they're expecting results that of anabolic steroids when that doesn't come? Now that do they get discouraged? So we have to play this line of like, listen, it is effective, it works, and it's very, very safe. Is it worth you taking it? Like probably. Right. Realistically, but
is
also
it worth coming at the expense of something else that would probably help you a lot more? Definitely not.
Yeah.
Right.
And so for me, I always just get frustrated when someone's like, hey, I haven't worked out in 20 years. What supplements should I get? I'm like, for
Right.
fuck's sake, dude. Like, that's not the first question you need to ask. And that's where I come from with my, like, what many people, it appears as though I'm anti-creatine. I'm not anti. I take creatine.
Right.
And like, if I'm sleep deprived, like if I don't sleep very much, I'll take a little bit more because I do notice that I feel a little bit more cognitively aware if I take a little bit more creatine. And the research on that is pretty convincing that it can help brain health and cognitive function performance. And if it's a placebo, great.
Right.
That's an awesome placebo to have.
Right.
I'll take it. But that's why I love this nuance, because it's like, we need to make people aware. Is it safe? Yes. Is it potentially helpful? Probably yes. But how much is it actually going to impact you? We just need to have an honest discussion about it.
Right. It's essentially, outside of like some of the cell swelling that might drive nutrients in there, which again, the magnitude of that might not even be noteworthy anyways. You've got essentially, with repeat bouts within a single session, when we're resting a long period between our sets, 3 or so minutes, there's something, I'm gonna botch these numbers, but at 3 minutes, I want to say you have roughly 80% of the creatine, or sorry, ATP being replenished by way of that creatine phosphate system. So by the rate limiter being creatine stores, if you take additional creatine, you might have a little bit more ATP going into that next set. If you're actually doing something where, like, let's say you're training to failure, and if you're actually, people who train hard know this. Let's say I've got 3 sets of 8 listed, but today I'm training their bicep curls and I'm doing them to actual failure. I'm going to probably get like 8, 7, 4, or 5.
Yep.
Right? By taking creatine, it might be 8, 7, 7.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So on that last set, I got a couple more beneficial reps. And there's even arguments. This is if we want to really get into the weeds of the science-based community, that with greater creatine stores, and if you're looking at something like the size principle and how like the largest type 2 fibers are essentially resting until we've fatigued those other ones or used a greater enough load. Now there's people that are actually arguing that those additional reps that you get are still, the earlier reps are still occurring where those highly fatigable fibers aren't being recruited when they would be recruited if you didn't have the creatine. So like,
that's nonsense.
Ultimately, ultimately, we are getting more volume. Are we getting more stimulating volume? I would still lean towards yes, but again, the magnitude is so small that we can actually make this argument and rationalize either way.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah. Well, actually, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but so you take creatine usually. Are there any supplements that you take outside of creatine?
If you consider protein a supplement and not food, yeah, I don't either. No.
That's it.
That's it.
Let me ask you this. You briefly mentioned the science-based community. I'm about to drop a bomb on you. Are you ready?
Should I start wrapping my hands?
Yeah. Why do you hate the coaches who advertise themselves as quote unquote science-based?
I don't hate them. I think one thing that I'll throw out there first, I'm going to flip this.
Okay.
They at least speak the same language as me to some degree. Versus like we look at like some of these movement cults. These guys don't speak the same language. I firmly think there's a term in debate called a deep disagreement, where essentially your value system and my value system are actually different on a foundational level. And no matter how rational of beings we may be, we will never come to it's a deep disagreement. We'll never come to a true agreement on that stance. I think with a lot of these functional movement cults, there exists a deep disagreement, which is a lot of times why I deflect with humor. The science-based lifters, we have the same value system. I think the difference there, and it's funny, you mentioned this earlier, people being sort of reinforced by the algorithm as opposed to their wealth of experience or as opposed to their education or whatever it may be, the things that give us perspective, right? When you see a new paper, maybe it totally contradicts something that you believe. you're filing that into all of the other things. Like you might go, that's interesting. And that's literally it. You may also go, oh man, I'm going to look into this more, right? But based on your experiences is where it files in. The science-based lifters, with the exception of the people who call it the heads of science-based lifting, they're a bit older. But the majority of the people creating content as science-based lifters are significantly younger than you or I.
Yeah.
We're unks.
Yeah, which is crazy.
It is
I
kind of
still
crazy.
feel pretty young.
Yeah. Depends on who I'm talking to. Sometimes I'm like, dude, I'm old as hell.
So true.
But yeah, I think so. They don't have an adequate reservoir of experience or other papers they've read or whatever to be able to fit these things in appropriately. And and that's what, like drop sets are vaulted or isometrics give you just as much growth as like lifting through a full range. Like there's all these different things where, okay, you encounter a paper or an infographic by Chris Beardsley and you go, this is it. This is everything, right? And yeah, there's some Dunning-Kruger with that as well. It's sort of like if you were to map out that Dunning-Kruger graph of like confidence and competence, you see the same thing in jiu-jitsu, right? Like late white, early blue belt, it's way up here. And then it's the valley of despair where you realize how deep the pool is, right? And you start to really recognize what's out there. And then as you actually become more of an expert, you start to place it more appropriately. You know where you fall. And I think we're just seeing that sort of play out with some of these science-based lifters. And not to be ageist or anything else, I also thought it was really frustrating. I got a lot of experience in strength and conditioning throughout my 20s. And I actually loved turning 30 just so that I could be like, I'm not one of those pesky, out-of-touch 20-year-olds anymore.
Yeah.
So I get it. I understand the frustration of if it sounds like I'm being ageist right now. I get it. But also, you have to understand the reality of if you are 20 years old, you are lacking in life experience. You just are.
Yep.
Right? How much of those 20 years were you even self-aware anyways, right? Like, let's be real here. You just lack some of that life experience. If you're passionate about what you do, that's great. But that is also another thing that I'd like to call into question. Like, okay, you and I love what we do, right? You made that challenge to that other dude, and I took that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to turn this into a piece of content, right? And like just sort of riffing off each other and having discussions that was a discussion in good faith.
Yeah.
You brought up a stance. I brought up a counter where honestly, our common ground is actually like 97% of, actually, it might even be 100%. It was just about how we were communicating.
Yes.
Right. But there was discussion in good faith. With a lot of these younger content creators, you see them create something that I think, despite Dunning-Kruger, I think they still know that it's sensationalist. Nowadays, it's called rage bait, right? Here, this is me being old again. But they will create that content that they know will drive engagement, and they won't even, I get it. You can't answer every comment. Totally understand. However, if somebody in my space, strength and conditioning as a whole is not that big of a community. If someone, even if they're not on my radar, if they comment and they ask something in good faith and I check out their profile and this person is an experienced coach, I'm gonna try to answer them if the format makes sense.
Yeah.
Or I'll answer some of them. You go into these comment sections and they're not answering anybody. There is no good faith discussion. The intent was not to have discussion. I don't like that. I think that a lot of what we do is teaching. I think a lot of what we do is empowering, is looking at that blend of the mental and physical benefits of the service we provide, right? And so not having any discussions with people who don't understand, with other accomplished coaches, with anybody, it doesn't pass the sniff test to me. It seems off. And I also don't think that's sustainable. So they're going to get to our age and they're going to continue to just create rage bait, get their page bigger and bigger, just rage bait, not interacting with other coaches. If you and I didn't have good faith discussions with people on our social media, this conversation would not be happening.
Correct.
I just don't think it's sustainable. I don't think if you're not having good faith discussions, I don't think that's productive. I don't think it's pushing things forward. I think you're just adding to the noise and the confusion. And to bring it back to what I was talking about before, we're not in an age that lacks information. Information is accessible, right? I think it's so cool that nowadays, like, when my son gets to a point where he goes, "Oh, Dad, why is the sky blue?" I could pull it up and I could be like, "This is why the sky's blue." Instead of, I don't know, 30 years ago, they'd be like, "Oh, shit, I don't know, reflects off the water or something." Like, information wasn't accessible then. Now it's so accessible that we don't know what to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the majority of science-based lifting content is helping people navigate that.
Great.
They're just adding more extreme views, a greater spectrum, a greater range for people to I don't know, pull into their consciousness and somehow choose what's correct. You're not doing any favors.
It creates more confusion, is
Right.
what it does. And in a day and age in which success is seen as likes and views and engagement on social media, creators are trying to come up with more ways to stand out. And that's what people are told. That's what the coaches are told. You have to stand out. You have to stand out. Like, okay, well then I will make this sound much more confusing. And I will, here's the thing with science-based lifting that I don't like. And I think people hear that and like, but I thought you like science. I love science. It's great. It's really the quote unquote science-based coaches are.
It's the branding.
They're branding it, but they're often misinterpreting and misrepresenting science in order to make them appear as though they're science-based. And they'll look at one study and they'll often misinterpret the study, but then apply it to literally everything. Like, you need to train with this exact range of motion at this line of pull. And if you're not using this line of pull, then you're not going to train these muscle fibers. It's like, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And you're causing people to be more confused and unaware. And you're putting them in this teeny tiny box of like, this is the only thing you're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
which then it's like, it's incredibly limiting and incredibly confusing, which drives more engagement. It absolutely drives more engagement. So for the creator, it might actually be positive. I don't think for their soul, and I actually think long-term it's not going to be good. But for the people who they claim to be wanting to help, it's far worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue that I have with the science-based coaches. And by the way, I consider both of us science-based, but it's not our brand. We're not like everything has to be a peer-reviewed paper. It's like, what about the practical experience in the gym? Like, have you coached people in person?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's one of the issues now is I have a lot of younger people who are like, I want to coach people online. I was like, I think you should start coaching people in person first.
Let's stop on that real quick. Okay, I don't think everyone has to coach people in person, but let's just go through the feedback, like not feedback loop, but the feedback that goes from client to coach in any interaction, right? Okay, I see you doing a squat. I give you a cue. I can tell that the cue didn't land. I change my communication style. I throw it at you. You ask me, what do you mean by that? I elaborate with an analogy, blah, blah, blah. Like, all of these things go on. Maybe the cue happens during the set, then in between the sets, we get into the analogy. And then you're like, oh man, I get it. Maybe I show you a little bit. I have you do maybe an adjacent drill, whatever. The amount of interactions that occurred there between two sets is astronomical. That if you stretch that out to an online coaching experience, that is, okay, I did my day one workout. Here are my videos. Okay, check in. This is what I think you should do differently. Okay, I think, here, I used those cues. I wasn't really sure what you meant about that second one. Oh, this is what I meant about that second one. Okay, here's the third week. Like, we're spreading that over one experience between two sets now over an entire month. Think about what that looks like over the course of an 8-hour day compared to how many years of online experience did you get in an 8-hour day? Maybe that's a little over dramatic, but I think that it's a very condensed process, and you're getting those reps so much faster. You're not even thinking about the fact that you're getting those reps. You're just training the person in front of you. I think something that I experienced, it's cool to go on podcasts and stuff like this. This is not how I talk to the average client.
Of course.
There'll be times after a session where sometimes they want a deep dive and I'm like, ooh, cool, can't wait. But between sets or during a set, man, if I can't say it in 3 words and have them know exactly what I'm talking about, man, nothing tells me that I've failed as a coach more than I give them a cue mid-set, which by the way, I do less and less the more experience I get. Like I very
Just
seldom.
finish the set and then we'll talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I choose to give them a cue during the set and they say what, I fucked everything up. You know, that's unacceptable to me. And that's like, I have a common one that I talk about. I think the word core is, if as a coach, you're using that with your clients, especially as a cue. All right, you're about to squat. All right, Jordan, tighten your core.
I was going to bring this up.
What do you mean? What do you mean? And also, we're 2 coaches. So like we might, okay, core, any muscle that moves or stabilizes the spine. Okay, got it. I'm going to brace. Well, then why didn't I just say brace? Deep breath and brace, right?
Yep.
There we go. That's way more specific. That's what I want you to do. Tighten your core. You take the average person. When someone has back pain and they say, oh, you need to strengthen your core. Do they go, okay, I need to strengthen every overlapping muscle. Technically, the glutes are part of the core under that definition. No, they're like abs.
Yep.
Okay, I'm squatting and someone says, tighten your abs. Activate your abs. Your abs pull your ribs and hips together. That's the same direction the weight is pulling. It's counterproductive. Like, yes, your abs are active to some degree while you're bracing, but that's not what you're saying. And that's what they like. Well, I've wanted to do this for a while, and at some point I'm going to do it. It's in my content notebook. I always circle back to it. It's going to take effort, but I want to, maybe I'll just do it at my gym, but I feel like there's like a sampling bias. I would want to do it at like a beach or something. Just go to 10 or 15 people and just be like, hey, if I say tighten your core, what does that mean to you? And get 10 or 15 answers.
I love that.
They're not going to be the same thing.
Yep.
Right? It's going to be like a Family Feud thing where you've got like the top 5 answers. So if
a lot of them are going to like do the stomach vacuum. They're going to suck in. That's a big one.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of them are going to just breathe out and just get completely loose. Like I would say a very small percentage will actually brace properly.
Right. And then again, like tighten your core. People will say that on a set of cable rows. They'll say it on a back squat. They'll say it on a deadlift. They'll say it on anything. So like you actually mean different things in some of those different contexts. So just say what you mean. Don't. Anyways.
The other part of that, which I never would have learned if it wasn't for coaching so many people in person, once you actually teach someone how to brace their core, now we have to take into the psychological and emotional component. When you brace your core properly, it's going to like stick out a little bit. And there were many people that I worked with who were like, I don't like doing it because it makes me look fat. It's like, oh, that's actually in your head right now. You're concerned about how other people are viewing you while you're squatting with 200 pounds on your back. You're concerned about your stomach sticking out a little bit more. Like, let's talk about that. Whereas like if you're just making content, or you're only coaching people online, it's very difficult to have those conversations.
Well, you might also think that it's sort of like a classroom, right? Like the one client who brings that up to you, you might not know that's a pretty universal thing.
Yeah.
And the one person brings it up and you're like, that's stupid. Don't worry about that. And then they feel belittled. They don't feel like, instead of being like, okay, I hear that a lot. This is how we're going to kind of work through it. Like that interaction matters, I think so. I think with the science-based lifting or the younger creators in that space, the desire to just make it online, which I get it, dude. I do get it. Like I love coaching people in person, but online gives you opportunities that in person never could. Totally understood. But like, why are we doing the thing that we do? What's the best medium to do it? Just do that for a bit. Just do that.
One of the things so I started jiu-jitsu in 2019 and I had wrestled for 10 years in high school, or before high school is when I started at 8 years old. But one of the things that took me by surprise, coming from a very science-based training background, is how hard some of these athletes will train and how much they'll do on a given day, because it goes against everything that we're told in terms of science-based lifting. And we have all these people talking about, well, this is how many sets and reps you're supposed to do. This is the total volume you should do. And like, you need to be tracking it meticulously, da, 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 da. And then you go into a jiu-jitsu academy and you look at the intermediate to advanced jiu-jitsu athletes. It's like, they'll train 2-3 times a day. They'll also get a lift in, and they do this nonstop. Now, often we call them professional athletes. Like, this is what they do, but it also flies in the face of like, what's optimal and what are you actually capable of? And it was a huge shift for me in 2019, being like, man, like these people are training way more intensely than I've been told we're able to train in what's quote unquote optimal. And I'm not recommending your average gym goer like do 2 jiu-jitsu sessions a day and then also a strength session and also to get cardio in. But it is eye-opening when you start looking at maybe we're capable of far more than what the quote unquote science-based world leads us to believe we are.
Yeah. Like talking about calcium ions after a set of 15. It's like, what the hell? Okay. Quantify the calcium ions in one of the 2-minute rounds we did last night.
Yeah.
If a set of 15 is not able to recover from like,
yes.
And also that was a relatively like light session. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think, dude, I just think the perspective is important. There's obviously, I think there's like the too regimented, too measured and precise end of things with science-based lifting. And essentially like the meme of that being like, oh, I don't want to be fatigued from my leg session later, so I'm going to take the power scooter in the in the grocery store, right? That's like the meme version of that.
Yes,
but really, some of them are actually just shades of gray away from that. And then on the other end, I thought this was cool because as someone who also grew up wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu and stuff, there's a part of me that still loves this. Eric Bugenhagen shared a thing from his college wrestling strength and conditioning program where the guys are running stadium stairs with like dumbbells on their shoulders and stuff, and guys are retching at the top. Like, yes, obviously that's like overkill, but also kind of cool. You know, like and I think this is like a continuum. Like I can look at the stuff that's like science-based and there's elements of that are kind of cool, but it's like too far that way. And then there's like, there's like the crazy, like, oh, the body adapts positively to stress, you say? Well, here's a truckload of it, right? And like, and that might go too far. And I think that a lot of training like that, we're looking at like survivorship bias and things, you know, the Bulgarians.
Yes.
You know, like
oh my gosh.
You know, stuff like that. However, I think it's like, that's what I talk, like when I'm talking about like this reservoir of experience, it's not just, oh, reading a good number of studies, even though that is important, right? It's not just training yourself, even though that's important. It's also looking at these different ends of the spectrum and even things that you could look at either one and not be like, you know, I don't wholeheartedly agree with either one, but understanding that there are like strengths to each of these.
Yeah.
And I think that like when we look at that as like a spectrum, like you and I might not fall on like the exact same place. That's cool. As long as we admit that this is like a spectrum.
Yes.
And that there's valuable stuff to pull from each of these.
I get frustrated with the content around, oh, you need to be careful, you're going to be overtraining.
Oh man.
That's what's frustrating. And that's for me where, you know, when I started jiu-jitsu, saw how hard these people are training. And by the way, I'm not just talking about like 18 to 24-year-old kids. I'm talking about 30s, 40s, 50s, people who are pushing hard on a very frequent basis. And the word overtraining isn't even in their lexicon. Like it's not, they don't even think about it. But on social media, we're told like, oh, you got to be careful. You don't want to do too many sets. You might be overtraining. I'm like, you're not not overtraining. I promise you, they use like CNS fatigue and burnout and all these scary terms, these nocebo terms that are going to cause someone to be like, well, I don't want to do too much. It's like, but what if you feel great?
Right.
What if you feel really good and you want to push yourself, but you're worried about overtraining or burning out your CNS? It's like, go hard, push yourself.
Fly too close to the sun for a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, that's where my training fits into my whole reservoir. Like when it comes to like, okay, what can you recover from? And I'm not always super extreme, but like when I tore my adductor,
I wanted to ask you about that.
Oh man. Yeah, I was being dumb. You know, if we look at the 4-day span that led to that adductor tear, I was in a big, like I was squatting often. Now normally just in the way that I categorize these movements for myself, over the years, I've been really big on low bar back squats and front squats. Distinctly different. Love them both. They both feel good on my body. I sort of got away from high bar squats because they're kind of in between the two and they're great. But in my head, I was telling myself like, they're kind of like, a shittier version of either, right? I want to hit either of those extremes. Started to add in Zerchers. I was like, oh, these are great. I don't even know where those fit into that spectrum, but these are great. Long story short, I was hitting front squats at least twice a week and hitting Zerchers once a week as well. And in that mix,
Heavy.
relative. I mean, when I do high frequency of an exercise or a movement pattern like that, I do drop intensity on some of the days and definitely drop volume. I'm not doing a ton of sets, right? Even though what I did was stupid, it wasn't crazy stupid. But with that, without removing anything, I wanted to start to get back into high bar squats, just as like, I kind of want to see what I can do. So I had on a Friday, I hit high bar for the first time and just did a couple. I think I did 2 sets of like 3 reps, relatively low effort at like 3 plates. And I was like, this is good enough because I'm front squatting tomorrow. And the next day was a front squat, true 2RM. So that was like the intensity day.
So
right?
just 3 plates of 315, 315 pounds, just for people who don't know. That's very strong.
Decent. So novel stimulus Friday, Saturday, good amount of overlap, really, really, really high effort. Sunday, I've been sprinting once to twice a week, every week for about a year and a half, getting back into it. But I had taken, for various reasons, I had taken about 3 weeks off. And even though I knew I wanted to ease back into it, I didn't really recognize how 3 weeks off could affect me. So Sunday was my sprint day. And I was like, oh, I'll slash volume, but I'm going to keep intensity really high. I even remember as I was doing some of those sprints, it was during some of the starts, I remember feeling a bit through the groin, right? And only did like 4 or 5 reps of like 30 meter from a 3-point stance. So nothing crazy, especially compared to what I was hitting when I was, but it was a more novel stimulus because I had 3 weeks off. Then the way I have things set up at my gym, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we don't see clients until the evening. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, super busy days, clients in there the whole time. Tuesday, Thursday is like our content day. So I was planning on doing this, and it's funny, I haven't returned to this, probably because I hurt myself. But an idea I had, I love Zercher squats. People love Zercher squats. Doing a Q&A with a Zercher imam, where it forces me to answer succinctly, right? So between each, like either singles or doubles, and then in the remaining 45 seconds or whatever, try to answer a question, which would also get funny because as I went on, I'd be like breathing heavier. I just think it's a cool format, right? And I was going to do that on that Tuesday, but Monday there was a lull in the middle of the day that there normally wasn't. And we had our garage bay doors open and I was like, man, the lighting's actually kind of sick. So I set up for it and I was miking myself up and everything. And the lighting was actually so nice. I was at one of the racks further from it and I'm like, man, I should move. Okay. So here's the next mistake. As I'm ramping up, that day I was going to do doubles at 365, which for my Zercher, that puts me around 80-ish%.
Super strong.
My Zerchers have gotten, I'm pretty proud of my Zerchers, but but 80%, nothing crazy. But ramping up to 315, I did on that one rack. And then I moved everything, including my camera, then had to recheck the mic I was wearing and everything else. It was literally a 30-ish minute break between my last ramp up and then my first working set. So super high levels of fatigue, lots of overlap, 2 movements with novelty, all programming nightmares. Like if I'm thinking about writing a program for a client, these are a million things that I would not do for them, do not do for them.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of these things, first off, I love training myself.
Yeah.
I just love training. And for myself, a lot of times, for better or for worse, I bend the rules a little bit, right? I know there's risk. And any one of these things on an island is risk that I don't think is worth considering. It got to a point where it was worth considering. Not only that, I remember telling my coach, Rodrigo, who was working at the time, that last ramp up rep at 315, I was like, man, my groin's feeling those those sprints from yesterday. Those words left my mouth. My body was telling me, right? And again, I think the valuable part of training yourself is you can fly too close to the sun. You can actually find what those limits are. true to what you were saying, a bunch of those different points were like too much fatigue, right? But we do also have limits. And I found it that day. Literally my first rep, mic'd up, go down. It sounds like pants tearing.
Yeah.
On the way
you
down.
can hear it. In the
Yeah.
video, yeah.
And then what's crazy is I actually slowed this down because I have morbid curiosity. Bailing from the bottom of a Zercher is easy when you can like lift your hips up and bail. But when you hurt something, I'm just sitting there at the bottom of the squat and I tried to come up again and you hear it rip more. And then I just muscle it over my legs. But yeah, I mean,
so I want to talk about that because you tore your adductor.
It wasn't a full rupture.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many people, I'm sure you deal with this as well, like they roll their ankle or they have an injury and they're like, well, I guess I'm not training anymore. But you actually use this as an opportunity to show like, I'm going to show you how I train through this injury. And you had mentioned earlier the idea of reducing the frequency of injury, but I think a very underrated aspect of the injury discussion is when you get injured, how do you get through it more quickly? How do you recover more quickly? So now you're back to squatting super heavy, like you're back to training, like no issues. How did you train through this injury? Did you take, I mean, I know the answer. Did you take 4 weeks off? Did you take 8 weeks off? Did you not train your lower body anymore? Like, how do you train after tearing your adductor, after ripping it? Like, what do you do? How do you continue to train?
So I'm a firm believer in heal it how you hurt it. And I was actually really scared the first day or two. Well, so real quick answer to your question, then I'll get to the details. I was able to Zercher squat, do the same exercise at the same exact weight, exactly 4 weeks to the day after I tore it.
That's amazing.
It was, but
many people would have stopped working out for 4 weeks.
For sure. I wanted to aggressively rehab it. I wanted to document it. Also, I don't have my DPT. So part of me not going to, and I did talk to some of my physical therapist friends, especially the 1 or 2 days after, I was pretty worried. To sort of share an important detail, I had just gotten onto my wife's insurance, and being the stupid, relatively young person that I am, I've had my bloods and a physical within a year anyways, so I wasn't in a rush. Didn't have a primary care established. To be able to actually go through, like if I did fully rupture it, to go through the channels and get surgery would have been a nightmare. So for people who are listening, if you are in between primary care practitioners, it's a good thing to do to get that lined up. Anyways, yeah, the first day or two, it was the most pain I had felt from a musculoskeletal injury. That night, actually, this is like kind of embarrassing, but I almost like vagaled and threw up.
Oh, geez.
So I remember I got up in the middle of the night, had to use the bathroom. Getting up, I was like, whoa, this hurts. Wait, all throughout that day, like obviously something was wrong, but it wasn't like unbearable pain. I'm just like, yeah, I did something. Let's see how the dust settles. Sleep for a few hours, wake up in the middle of the night. I'm like, oh, this is significant. And I'm like hobbling my ass to the bathroom, get to the bathroom. Had to sit down, but in the process of sitting to the toilet seat, excruciating. Like I sat, as soon as I sat down, immediately like broke out in a cold sweat.
Oh
I was
my
like,
God.
I was like, oh man, this is brutal. Go to the bathroom, whatever. And then getting back up, I'm like, I can't call my wife in here to help me. Like I got to get up, get up on my own. We have we have a bathroom that's pretty far from the baby's room. So that's the one that I went to. Cause like flushing, I don't want to wake them up.
Yeah.
Right. Our guest room is right next to that bathroom. I kid you not, as I get up, I'm like, I might vomit, so I'm going to just lay down in the guest room and I just laid there. Like I didn't see myself, but I must've been like pale, clammy.
Oh my God.
Just thought I was going to puke. Got myself together, went back to bed. All that to say, the first 1 or 2 days I was pretty concerned. And it takes a few days for the bruising to show up anyways. Not that the bruising's going to tell you all that much anyways, but day 3, I was able to do a body weight squat, unassisted. Days 1 and 2, I saw how much I would hold on to like handles in the squat rack and see how much I had to help myself. And the answer was a lot. Day 3, I was able to do a couple sets. I didn't go nuts with it, and I didn't go anywhere near failure, but I got some body weight squats in.
Was there pain?
Oh, there was pain. But my buddy, Kevin Haynes, who is, he's a chiropractor and rehab specialist in Canada. He's come down and visited me. He gave me a great simplified system for navigating injury that I use with all my clients. It's just breaking down that 1 to 10 pain scale as a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. 0 to 3 is a green light, right? If you're rehabbing an injury, there's going to be pain, right? There's no way around that. 0 to a 3, things are good, right? Proceed. 4-ish to 6-ish is a yellow light. You can proceed, but be cautious here, right? This is a realm where like your body might be trying to tell you something and it's worth starting to listen to. And then 7 and above is red. Stop, right?
I like that traffic light
It's
system.
so simple. And with all my clients, they're dealing with an injury. You know, I'm having them do an exercise they're not sure about. They're hitting a ramp up. I'm like, where are we at? And they're like, green light. Like we know that it's been communicated.
That's awesome.
Very effective way for us to navigate that. Because I don't want to just arbitrarily choose numbers for them as a coach. Like we need to have, again, that feedback, that interaction. So anyways, by day 3, I was squatting. It was yellow, but it was unassisted. I was pretty happy. And that told me, I'm like, okay, likelihood of a full rupture is very low at this point. Like, thank God. Because I still had not gotten the ball rolling. I was kind of in denial that I would potentially, if I needed surgery, you wouldn't see improvement like that in 3 days, So 1 week out, that next Monday, I got to the point where I was doing Zercher squats with 95, just with a 25 on each side of the bar. And a point that I was trying to make was heal it how I heard it. Like if you think about it, a structure failed at the specific joint angles and forces present in that exact variation. As long as I'm smart about letting that limiting factor guide me back, the most direct way to load that tissue is by doing that exact thing. So that's what I did. And every week on Mondays, I made it my Zercher squat day. And obviously I went from squatting like 4 days a week down to just 1, right? And I did a bunch of other things. Like I found as I got into later weeks, the trigger that was last to go was velocity. So even like deeper tier plyos bothered it for a while, ran those for a while. It took me 6 weeks to get into any type of sprinting, and then about 8 weeks to be like, I'm normal.
That's amazing.
So even at 4 weeks, hitting the same weight in the squat, it's such a controlled setting. It's so predictable that I was not at 100%. And it took me 3 weeks to do jujitsu.
That's not bad at all.
No, it's not bad. And I'm also really big on setting up a staircase, not just in like lifting and rehab, but also in your sport. And like, if I was taking jujitsu more seriously at the time, I most definitely would have reintroduced drilling to feel out the positions that were more difficult, maybe a little bit earlier. Because in those first like 2 weeks, I saw a lot of progress. And I was trying to push it. I was trying to have aggressive rehab, but it was calculated. At no point was I making a huge jump. The biggest jump was maybe that 1 week doing that Zercher squat with 95. But like I was crushing body weight squats. I threw the bar in there. It felt, not great pain wise, but it was okay.
It was a green light still. Maybe light
yellow. It was yellow. By the time I got to 95, it was yellow. And so why push it? Could I have gotten away with 115 or maybe even 135? Sure. But why?
Right.
Like I got to where it was yellow. I was like, this is a win. 1 week. If you told me the day I heard it, that 1 week later I'd be Zercher squatting, let's take that win. So even though I was aggressive, I wasn't like greedy. It wasn't like, oh, let's keep flying too close to the sun.
What I really like about this traffic light system is that it essentially normalizes some level of pain. Because what we hear in regard to overcoming injury and recovering from injury is that just never, ever, ever, any pain stop. Any pain whatsoever. It's like, okay, well, there's going to be pain. There will be. You're injured. And if you just don't do anything for it, if you don't load the tissues whatsoever, even just with body weight or even assisted, like if you don't load it, it's actually going to make the recovery significantly longer. More
You're going to decondition more.
Exactly. So I like that it normalizes a light to moderate level of pain while emphasizing caution as you get higher up that system. I think it's genius.
It's great. And I used to just use like the 1 to 10. That's tough. here, this could be a separate conversation, but has anyone ever come to you and said, oh, I have really low pain tolerance?
No.
It's rare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody, oh, I got a high pain tolerance. Compared to what? What
Yeah.
are you talking about? So anyways, when you do the 1 to 10 thing, you've got all these personality traits and stuff you got to sift through. If you simplify it to those 3 lights, it sort of encompasses, it just simplifies it to such a beautiful way.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes maybe the more apprehensive person would say yellow a little, fine. Again, it's the mental and the physical. If they're going to say yellow a little too early, totally cool. We're still, like you said, normalizing that pain will be a part of the process. We're still able to train that directly. The wins are still happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take it at the pace that person's comfortable with, which is also important.
I've found, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I found that women tend to underestimate their pain tolerance and men do overestimate it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I found that like women are often like, they get scared of certain things more, but then as the coach, when I'm watching generally women versus generally men, women are actually able to do much more than they thought, and they're able to do more impressive things with relative ease.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas men, they think they're going to be able to do more, and it's like, oh,
they're Wolverine.
Yeah.
In their eyes. Yeah.
They think it's like, oh, this is going to be no problem. And all of a sudden they're like, that was way harder than I thought. But women are like, yeah, like their RPE, like their rate of perceived exertion is like maybe a 7, whereas like they thought it would have been a 10 or impossible to do. Whereas the men are like, oh, I'm going to be able to do that easily. And it's like, oh, that was failure, dude. Like that was way harder than it should have been.
Or even the revisionist history where you watch someone grind out like an 8-second rep and then they rack it and they're just like, I had
It was a warm up. Yeah.
1 or 2 more. And I'm like, bro, no, you did not. Absolutely not.
I want to switch gears now a little bit away from pain and injury, more towards performance. And starting off with something you said the idea that bodybuilding or powerlifting cannot improve athleticism is lazy and inaccurate. I want to start here. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Let's start with the argument. That argument is normally portrayed where you are grabbing a single anecdote, a single example of a powerlifter or a bodybuilder. One example that's been really popular lately was that video of Larry Wheel sprinting where like his head and spine doesn't move at all. And they're like, look, powerlifter guy, no run good, is essentially like the logic.
That's the argument,
right?
Yeah.
And cool. You found a person where powerlifting didn't serve them in that context.
It's not even that powerlifting didn't serve them, they just didn't train it.
That's what I was going to get to. It's like taking a physics test without studying physics.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, your calculus didn't help you there, did it, bro? And it's like, there is some overlap, but you got to learn physics to take the physics test, right? And for someone who's in physics, what do you know? Also taking calculus at the same time might have some transfer that's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of the same. I think that to sell their own programs, people will point out that, oh, we're different than that powerlifting and bodybuilding. Look how this didn't help this person. You don't want to end up like them, do you? But with me, with these bands and these kettlebells and this cool twirl that I do, that'll get you ready for sprinting. You know, in reality, I like to really just focus on like, okay, what tissues are we loading? What adaptation is occurring? How do we know? Right? So there's the increases in performance over time. And then also having the specificity to the task that we are going to judge them on or that they compete in or whatever, right? So if the person is sprinting, you know, if we want to pull up anecdotes, I've got a bunch of videos on my phone of Noah Lyles hitting power cleans, hitting squats, and I think he's pretty good at sprinting, right? But he is also sprinting at the same time.
Yeah.
So with those arguments, I just think people need to have somebody willing to call out the absurdity of that argument. And I just don't want to, I could, and there have been times where I resort to just like, oh, you're going to pick an anecdote, I'm going to pick an anecdote. And like, sure, we can like fight fire with fire like that. And it might even like do better in terms of a post, but I think that like effective training, if you've got somebody prepping somebody like with, GPP for a sport, or maybe they just train jujitsu recreationally or whatever, and they've got elements of strength training, they've got some conditioning, they've got some plyos, potentially some form of sprinting in there. That is just like a really well-rounded way to improve general qualities that then that person will apply in whatever context that they want to. Those are the things that are transferable. There's a lot of things that people like to think are transferable that are not. Coordination is one of those. Balance is one of those. Those things, like when you're training balance and it's like a bell up kettlebell press and you're balancing on something, it is just the specific coordination to that task. Your inner ear is not functioning any better from that, right? It could also be something like surfing, right? You're just coordinating that task. But what are we coordinating? We're coordinating the hardware that we have that we build through GPP. We are coordinating the muscles, and the CNS is telling them just how hard or not to contract at different points through the process of learning and coordination. You improve the capacity of those muscles, and they can be more finely tuned by that nervous system. So I think focusing on that pool of physical qualities and breaking down each one. How important is each one to you? I see that over the last few years, you've made a shift. So I like to look at 4 general physical qualities that encompass the vast majority of what I do as a strength and conditioning coach. We have force production. We have velocity or power. We have flexibility or range. And then we have conditioning, which is energy system targeted work, right? And within each, there are different things we can do. Within velocity, right? There's more impulse based things that we can do, like a power clean or loaded movements. There's more like short ground contacts, things like plyos and things like that, right? All of those will fall into
the general categories.
Yeah, exactly. And anything that isn't those 4, and if you change any of those 4 qualities, if, for example, you've been working on range and flexibility a bit more, when your body coordinates a motion in jiu-jitsu, you might all of a sudden, if you change that quality, maybe you encounter something like, I don't know, a berimbolo, and you don't like it because you don't have the range for it. And then you change that range and you circle back around, and a year and a half later, someone teaches you a berimbolo, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, this works now, right? Like there are different ways that you can pull from those general qualities. And if you improve them, they might open up more of the sport-specific coordination to you. There are people that will sell you on the fact that there are things you can do in the weight room to improve your sport-specific coordination. That is largely nonsense. Coordination is very task-specific. Balancing on that Bosu ball is not going to, if I've never surfed before and I get really, really good at balancing on a Bosu ball, I'm still starting surfing from day one.
Yeah.
I'm learning a new task. They are different. They're not transferable. And the same is true for any sort of sport. Just because a task looks more like it, you're not getting transfer. We alluded to it a little bit yesterday in our discussion about the constraint-led approach to skill acquisition versus the traditional one. And people within that CLA camp will actually say that rote drilling doesn't even transfer to training with a live opponent. It is maybe at most changing your awareness slightly so that those skills can still emerge and be practiced in the exact context you need it. So if we potentially live in a world where rote drilling of the actual sport doesn't transfer, why do we think that spinning with a kettlebell is going to? Right. It's actually insane when we think about it. Is there anything I could do with you in the weight room before your first day of jiu-jitsu that will allow you on day one to not be a white belt?
Nope.
No. So
you have to train.
Exactly. And the same is true for sprinting. The same is true for all of these different applied physical endeavors. You're going to learn to coordinate what you have from that pool of physical qualities, but we can't get far enough on that spectrum of specificity to ever really move the needle for the task anyway. So train those 4 qualities at whatever priority works for you, and limiting fatigue to some degree so that you can direct a good amount of your time and effort and energy to training the sport.
I think people very often underestimate the value of just getting stronger, whether it's like or improving any of these qualities, right? Just period. Whether that's through powerlifting modalities, bodybuilding modalities, running modality, whatever it is, of improving their overall GPP, general physical preparedness, and they undervalue the skill of actually doing whatever it is they want to get better at. But then they'll look at something like, okay, you take someone who wants to be a better golfer, and they're like, okay, so that means I should get on the cable machine in the gym and practice my golf swing on the cable machine. Well, this must get me stronger with my golf swing. That's number one, it's going to change your entire technique because you can't fully replicate it. Number two is if you want a stronger golf swing, then you should get stronger in rotation, period. Even if it's not exactly the same motion, you want to progressively overload the rotation in general. You want to get stronger in rotation in general, which is that GPP, and then you get better at your golf swing. And then you'll be able to transfer that force to the golf swing, which no matter what you do in the gym, you're not going to get better at golfing unless you play golf. And then the more your brain learns how to coordinate and how to actually fire these muscles and use this technique, then you can produce more force within that technique from you getting stronger.
Right.
I think that's where people discount powerlifting, bodybuilding, just general strength training, because they think, well, it doesn't look like the activity that I'm trying to get better at. So it doesn't need to look like the activity. You just need to get stronger and be able to teach your brain to produce more force and then transfer that over to the actual specific skill.
100%. I do think in today's landscape, there is a bit of a shift though. So you mentioned like rotational power, which is of course important, but also you can load tissues and elicit adaptation so much for. Don't think that I'm against rotation, because I'm not. And I have all my athletes and a lot of my clients do that, and I do it myself. However, you look at I'm working on a post for this right now. You look at videos of these dudes in the steroid era of baseball.
Yeah.
They didn't get built like linebackers from doing twisty poos. Like, bro, they just lifted heavy weights and then cranked home runs. Like, a lot of that stuff is transferable when it looks nothing like it.
Yeah.
If they've got quads bulging out of their pants from doing squats and leg extensions and stuff, and then they're pushing off that back leg and initiating the swing and have more like force going through the ground and therefore leading up and into that rotation.
Force is force, dude.
Yeah.
Strength is strength. It's going to transfer.
Exactly. So again, not saying that those rotational things don't have a place, but they're also not the meat and potatoes, even if you're competing in a rotational activity.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of juice to be squeezed from those quote unquote traditional movements.
You've spoken a little bit about plyos and explosive work. This is something that I think right now is not used enough with just everyday gym goers, your average population. Now, the cool thing is you don't need a lot of it in order to reap the benefits of it. I'm wondering, how do you incorporate speed-based, plyo-based, velocity-based training, not for the high-level athletes, although it might actually probably look very similar, but for the average everyday person who's just a fitness enthusiast who wants to get stronger and more athletic and move better? How do you incorporate this stuff into their training?
I'll answer it by asking you some questions.
Okay.
How would you feel right now if you got under a barbell and squatted? We've been sitting here a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, you feel ready to squat right now?
I mean, listen, I would rather have a little bit of a warm up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, we're cold right now, and most people's days are in a setting like you and I are right now, right? Maybe they're not yapping as much, but they're sitting in this pretty stationary posture. I think from a nervous system perspective, from a psychological perspective of just like a shift of setting, right? If we went from what we're doing right now and I brought you through a series of some broad jumps and some pogo jumps and then asked you the same question, you'd be like, bro, I'm ready to squat right now. Yeah. So I think there's also something that can be done. We can talk about potentiation. We can get really nerdy about it. We could also just get into the fact that they are something that do a phenomenal job of getting you ready to perform like intense physical tasks because they themselves are intense. And you're building some unique qualities in the meantime. And they're also, when you don't do them to their extremes, when we don't do crazy volumes of them, they're not super fatiguing.
At all.
Yeah.
You feel better when they're done.
Exactly. So if we do a couple, like generally, easy rule of thumb, if we were to do, like if we want to take very basic movements, I give you 3 sets of pogos, 3 sets of broad jumps. And for the pogos, maybe we do
Pogos are just basically hopping up and down.
Yep, and really focusing on that ankle and like those short ground contacts, and then a broad jump is just jumping forward. Let's say we did 3 sets of 15. A way I like to talk about like low pogos, it's kind of like jumping rope without the rope.
Yeah,
more intent on how you strike the ground because we're not distracted by a rope, but more or less that really short ground contact. Give you 3 sets of 15 there, 3 sets of 4 for your broad jumps, and you don't have to rest as long as you do for your strength work. A minute or so, and you're ready to go
between
again.
sets.
Yeah. If we were to do those, you would be way better off to squat in that exact moment.
You would lift heavier
for sure,
100%.
So I like to front load our first lower body exercise with some plyos.
Same.
Could be 2 movements, could be 1 movement. There's a million ways we can apply it, but I think they're really valuable when you're fresh. I think you get more out of them when you're fresh, and I think you also get more out of whatever immediately follows them. Mm-hmm. So that's the easiest way. Throw them in the beginning of your session. Do 2-3 sets. If you have any ambition to really train plyos in and of themselves, something that I have done for a while on days where this is going to be kind of telling. For a couple months, I had a day of the week that was my favorite lifting session where I just did plyos and arms.
I love that.
It's like such a blend of like athleticism and just bro.
Yeah.
So for those days where the plyos were a much bigger emphasis and I wasn't worried at all because I wasn't doing any lower body stuff, it was like, let's really train these. I would actually I wouldn't go into it saying I'm doing this many sets of, I would do more intensive ones like continuous broad jumps or standing triples or whatever. Standing triples are my favorite.
They're devastating, dude.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Jump off 2 legs, bound on one, bound on the other, land back on 2. I actually marked up, there's like a red line in our parking lot, and I have like little Sharpie marks at distances, so I have it measured out. But yeah, on those days where it's a plyo focus day, I would just go into it knowing about what I normally do for my standing triple. And when I got 2 reps in a row that were like a 10% decrease from where I normally get at that point in time, that's where fatigue is accumulating. I'm not really training power to that same degree. I'm done. When I started out doing days like that, that was like after 5 or 6 warm sets. It's crazy how your body adapts to it though. I got to a point where it was like 10, 11, 12 sets. Wow. Yeah. And then I would see that drop off. So yeah, it's like anything else. Your body becomes accommodated to it. However much you choose to use it, the average person listening who's not doing any, you don't need a plyo focused day. Yeah. Add 1 or 2 in the beginning of your sessions. Super easy. You get a ton out of that. If you like it, if you really enjoy it and you want to focus on it, that's a cool way to do it where you go into it not knowing how many sets you're going to do. Just do it until your performance decreases and then cut it there.
I like the plyos for so many reasons, but what I found is when people start strength training, it's very addictive because it feels very empowering. They're getting stronger than they ever thought possible. They're seeing the amount of weight that they're lifting go up, and they're like, wow, like I'm strong. I can do this. I've found plyos are very similar in that people start doing things with their body they never thought that they could do, especially as they get older. Mm-hmm. And maybe they weren't an athlete growing up. Maybe they never did really any plyos, but all of a sudden, like, one of the coolest things for me is seeing like in the inner circle, there's a group of women who've like never jumped. And now all of a sudden, like they're doing box jumps, and they're like the level of empowerment that they feel because now they're like, I'm jumping on a 12-inch box, I'm jumping on a 16-inch box, and they're doing like 3 sets of 4. there's something about feeling more confident in what your body can do that is unlike anything else, and it bleeds into every aspect of your life. When you see like, hey, I wasn't able to do this before. In fact, I was petrified of doing this, and I just did that, and I can now do it relatively easily, and I can do it with less of a warm up, and I can do it at the drop of a dime. The plyos are so unique because I really feel like it is among the most athletic things someone can do within their training, especially if it is more of a strength-based program. Adding in plyos, you move. You're an athlete now. And I don't care if you're just an everyday fitness gym goer, you're moving like an athlete. And the level of confidence that comes from that, and that bleeds into being able to lift heavier. It bleeds into, I think, being more consistent in the gym. It bleeds into, I think, being a better human, like you're being able to offer your help to someone because you're more confident in your ability to do it. In the same way that being able to not be fearful of rounding your back when you deadlift, it's like, I can pick up this suitcase. I'm not scared of rounding my back anymore because I know that I'm strong enough to handle it. Plyos are, I think, one of the most underrated ways to improve your confidence as a human that leads into everything improving in the gym.
Absolutely. I think, and then even outside of just that conscious confidence, going back to that example of somebody starting to stumble and sticking their leg out, man, if you're crushing box jumps, broad jumps, whatever, where you're actively trying to jump as far or as high as you can, a stumble and catching your body weight is actually such an easy task versus I haven't experienced impact in 18 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's very profound. And our world, I mean, you talked about how it bleeds into everything else. I mean, it quite literally does. If you believe that you are capable of more, like we talked about, it affects your sensory environment. It affects when you see a piece of content, when your kid asks you something, when, you know what I mean? All of these different things are very much shaped by how we see the world. So changing that in a productive direction, it seems cheesy to someone who hasn't done it, but it is profound. You know, sometimes you then end up building a whole personality and life around it and starting a podcast, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's real. And I think what I will say with plyos though, and this comes down to being a skilled communicator and coach, there is most definitely a point where you can turn around and say, wow, this is awesome. But getting started and getting going on the process is a little tough when someone's used to moving to the next stack on the cable column, when they're used to grabbing the next dumbbell and having that be the aha moment, because those things aren't usually present. Yes, you can jump to a higher box. There are some like constraints like that, but sometimes people, whether it's the initial apprehension with the process that I talked about, like doing it socially and everything else, coupled with their progress, like you got to be a bit creative with how you gas them up about it, with how you tell them what to look for, what to strive for, how to train it. They can be challenging to coach in that sense, or for somebody who's watching and starting to do them. Like what I'm huge on is just training with intent, whether that's jumping, whether that's doing a set of bicep curls, whether that's us doing some jujitsu in a garage. Like I think intent is so important. And again, we're talking about, it's not like, oh, how much information can I collect like their Pokemon cards? No. What can I focus on right now that's going to move the needle? And with different plyos, that's different things. With a box jump, it might be like, hey, I don't want you to just grab a higher box and yank your feet up higher. I want your hips to actually travel, right? Okay, what am I focusing on? Boom, I've got this cue now that's going to allow me to really get the most out of it. If it's something like a pogo, starting to get into it with somebody, be like, hey, you're being very like sticky on the ground. I want you to preemptively attack the ground. You know, if you're working with someone who's a solid coach, they will be able to communicate that in a way where you have these objectives and you have these things so you can train with intent and you're not just like, all right, jump harder. Jump. What do I do now? Is my bicep bigger?
Yeah.
What is this?
I like with plyos and jumping and that type of movement to take videos from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the markers of progress that I'll show them is like, listen, when you first started doing this, you were hitting the ground hard. You could hear it. You like it looked very uncoordinated. And I'll be like, listen, and I'll show them in slow motion, like it took you this long to get off the ground for your next jump. Now it's taking you a fraction of the time to get into your next jump, which means that you are producing more force more quickly. You have better reactivity. Like this is exactly what we're looking for. Maybe you're not jumping higher, but the time you're spending on the ground is less. And we can see this in this video. And not to mention just watching the video back and be like, yeah, here I look like the Tin Man. And here I look like a deer. Like
Right.
here I look like I'm a kangaroo, whatever. It's like you just look coordinated. It's I think that is one of a very underrated way to assess progress in something like a plyo, where it's not as simple as add more weight or even like you said with the boxes, like, yeah, you could jump higher on the box, but let's measure your hip height at this box. Like, I don't care if the box height is going up. I care, are your hips traveling higher? Because there are ways to cheat a box jump. Like, we just tuck harder and you essentially get into a really deep squat position at the top. It's like, are your hips higher or not? So I really like using that as a tool for assessment, just to keep people motivated and invested in it.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you, you're a dangerous dude. You are, and what I mean by that is like you're a very skilled fighter, and you and I trained very lightly last night. Thank you for being very, very gentle. You're also incredibly thoughtful and gentle in your approach. Not just like in when you and I train, but also I feel like as a human, you are very empathetic. You're very gentle. You're very thoughtful with what you're saying and how it's coming across. I'm wondering, have you always been this way? Like a more of like a gentle giant or a gentle savage, if we want to call it that? Like you have the capacity to really do damage, but you really are incredibly thoughtful in how you approach what you're saying and how you're saying it. And how would 18-year-old Alex compare to 34-year-old Alex?
No, I've not always been this way. No, I was angry growing up. I was angry, angsty. Even my initial, it's funny, like our motivators for lifting weights or getting started with jujitsu, especially over the time span of something like 20 years, they change. I got into jujitsu because there were two moments growing up where I got jumped, and I didn't get badly hurt in either scenario, but I did distinctly remember the feeling of being helpless and never wanted to feel that way again. So logically, I signed up for something where I felt that way all the time. But no, it was, yeah. And jujitsu very early on, I most definitely had a chip on my shoulder. I remember I only trained no-gi at first because I was also wrestling at the same time. About 2 years in, I went to a belt testing. They had belt testings at the place where I started. Borrowed a gi from one of the instructors for the belt test, right? Dead set. My 16-year-old self was convinced. I'm like, I'm getting my blue belt today, right? The instructor knew that I loaned a gi from him, right? And also, like the differences we were talking about last night, like I talked about how it was super cool, how you're very obviously embracing the gi, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, how could I have embraced the gi? The first time I wore one was at that belt test. And then there was a portion that was rolling. And I remember I submitted a few people that got their blue belt that day, and I submitted a few guys who were blue belts. So come the promotion time, I'm like, here it is. Load me up with that blue belt, right? And I got 2 stripes. And man. I was so pissed. I was like, fuck belt testing. It's a stupid practice anyways. It also caused me to not put the gi on again for another 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So the first 7 years I trained was all no gi. And even then when I started to fall in love with the gi more towards the end of college, when I was really training more again and really embracing the gi, at that gym, there was also, it was one of those like traditional rules where you can't ask higher belts to roll. So I would just plop down in front of them and just look at them. I was a piece of work. So yeah, was a lot angrier back then, not as even keel.
Why were you angry?
I think a bunch of reasons. Just all the testosterone of being a teenager hitting my system all at once. That'll do crazy things to a guy.
Yeah.
I think I was kind of like nerdy growing up. Was super skinny before I started to get into lifting. Those moments of, there were other moments of like bullying and stuff like that. And I was training jujitsu to try to remedy a lot of that. And I really think something that's been super fulfilling for me is, one of the reasons I started lifting, I wanted to help with like jujitsu and wrestling and stuff like that. But another part of it was just I was really insecure about being so skinny and being insecure about not being able to, feeling helpless, not being able to handle myself in like a fight or a confrontation, and also being skinny, and then like falling in love with the process. And literally those are like things I don't even think of anymore unless I'm like asked this question. Like there's been such a shift on such a deep level. I think sometimes insecurities are things that we can't help. They're irrational, they're whatever, right? Like that is, but there are also very real scenarios where an insecurity is like an anxiety about something you want to do and alleviate. And it can be very, what's the word? Yeah, very freeing to address those things and not be bound by them anymore. And I think you're seeing that version of me. I mean, another thing that I didn't really point out last night, like the biggest part of my game is a straight ankle. Love straight ankles. And a few times early on, you're like, man, forget when people are attacking your feet. I'm like, noted, we're not going for straight ankles today.
That's really funny because I was hating on that. You didn't say a word.
Yeah, well, but also, I think there's a lot to be said about like, we got into this a little bit last night too, but like, how do we both have a productive training session?
Yeah.
And I think, I've got some unique experience and stuff that I can share with you, but also for me, like, how do I workshop stuff that is productive in that moment?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that. And while it is fun and I do have rounds where I go really hard, I still train at Atos, and like, you're not going there for light rounds.
Yeah.
And I've split my practice now. I train a bit at my gym and I train a bit at Atos. And when I go to Atos, that is a day where I'm looking for hard rounds. I'm looking for people my size because I want to go really hard and not, that's the application day. Mm-hmm. And then I have the days at my place where sometimes I'm choosing somebody, I'll go with Dom, who's way better than me. All right, today is like pick his brain a little bit and also survive. And then I'll have days where I'm going with somebody who maybe I'm a lot better than. It's like, okay, what am I workshopping? And just really fitting it and training selfishly and be like, okay, what's the objective today? How do I stick to that objective? And how do I allow that objective to take the biggest step forward that I can in the sport that day? And I think, people term this a lot to like, oh, kill the ego, don't train with ego. That's a load of crap. I think it's important. Like I have those days at Atos. I have, it's funny. I even put names to it. Like, I think, having a nemesis, whether spoken or unspoken, is important. Those rounds with someone who's around your level, they're either a little better or a little worse or right there with you, where like, you just go, I'm not letting this dude win today. Those are important. They cannot be all of your rounds. And you cannot be placing a nemesis on someone who is, a blue belt who looked at you the wrong way.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not in a realm of skill acquisition. Cool. You beat up someone you were supposed to, and you're actually kind of angry and a dick about it. Like that's not helpful. So I think just trying to train selfishly, be very, like open with myself on like what my intention is today. And then reflecting on that and being like, did I do a good job of that? Old me was always, everyone's a nemesis round. You're a nemesis. You're a nemesis. That dude looked at me. That guy didn't give me my blue belt. Like, and that also just wasn't, that was also an anxiety inducing way to train.
Yeah.
Dude, jiu-jitsu is intense, right? Wrestling's intense. Wrestling's probably more intense, but it made it, I remember when I was able to so I started training before I could drive. Right before I was 16. But I remember as I was some of my first like car rides by myself or going to the gym. And like, I remember distinctly, like I'm nervous that I'm driving and I'm also nervous that I'm going to go fight adults. Right. Like, and that wasn't Yeah, I think the reasons that I started both of those are just not the reasons that I still do those things. And I think that those changes happened in a very productive way. You know, I don't want to be that kid.
What would you say to someone who might want to start jujitsu, maybe for similar reasons? They don't want to feel helpless. They want to be able to protect themselves if God forbid they need to, but they're nervous. They're nervous about stepping into a jiu-jitsu academy. They don't know what to expect. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to be embarrassed. Like, what do you say to someone? Because I'm always trying to get people to do jiu-jitsu. Always. Like, I just think it's men, women, kids. I don't care if you're 70 years old. Like, I want to get everyone doing it. But there are very real and valid concerns that people have. So how do you approach that?
First things first, you are the youngest that you're going to be for the rest of your life right now. Do something with it, right? Those risks that you're thinking about, that you're building up, are going to become more entrenched, more real. You're going to be old 5 years from now. However old you think you are now, you're going to be older then, right? Like do those things now. Take advantage of that. And also, as it relates to injury, this is a concept that I preach to a lot of my athletes, to a lot of my regular clients. Like we've sort of alluded to, injury is inevitable. You're going to get hurt. You're going to feel pain. Pain is a feature, not a bug of biological systems. Curtis, bless his soul, I wish it wasn't the case, but at some point he has and will feel pain. He's a biological creature. Like, that happens, and it helps guide us and steer us in certain directions. But sometimes the fear of that pain can keep us from doing something that is like really deeply enriching. If you have that desire, if this desire hasn't just been through the course of this podcast, but like it's something that you've thought about in the past, act on it. You've clearly returned to this and you've wanted to do it. And the thing that I preach to clients and stuff is the fact that dealing with an injury is a skill. That skill, you heard like my 20 years into this journey version of that skill when I tore my adductor. If we go way back, I tore my labrum in college wrestling. All of my healthy outlets were taken from me, and I was a mess. I was in college. I was drinking. I was doing all, you know what I mean? And I was convinced that I'm never going to lift again. I'm never going to wrestle again. You know what I mean? Just dramatizing. Like, that skill was not polished. No one explained it like that to me. And I thought an injury was just this thing that, it'll never heal the same. I'm like, great, cool. My shoulder's screwed. Don't have a shoulder anymore. Realistic. I never even had surgery for it. And I can outperform anything my shoulder did then a millionfold, you know? So, learning that dealing with an injury is a skill in and of itself, and that very few injuries are life sentences, even extreme injuries. Those two things together, when you truly believe them, when you look for reasons to actually accept that might be true, it opens up a world of things for you to do. Another thing that I've been loving, I've been preaching about this online. I've been preaching about this to clients. I can't say enough about it. Ben Askren's journey.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Bro, okay.
Oh my goodness.
First off, for anyone who's not familiar, had a staph infection at the end of May, traveled to his lungs, immediately slipped into a coma, died 4 times, had a double lung transplant, lost 60 pounds, was unrecognizable in his videos after the fact. And now is currently in this brutal journey of just trying to live life again. And he's posting about it. And his posts, man, I'm like, ever since having my kid, I've become a sap.
Yep.
For better or for worse. But dude, some of his videos hit. And the perspective shift is crazy. So something he's been preaching, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's called the Stockdale paradox.
Okay, I'm not.
John Stockdale was an admiral in the Vietnam War, was a prisoner of war for 7 years, and survived. And he came, of course, people ask, like, how did you possibly do this? And through the things that he observed with other prisoners, he came up with a philosophy that's actually really been co-opted a ton in business. I love it for injury. But basically, he really focuses on the blend of two seemingly incompatible ideas to lead to productive action. And those two ideas are optimism in ultimately improving your position, combined with I think the term for it is the brutal reality of your current state. And truly blending those two things. So what he noticed, people who have more of a blind optimism, where they're like, oh, I'm going to be out by Christmas. They do great till that arbitrary date rolls along. Then it comes by, they have nothing left to focus on, and they would crash. And then other people who were too realistic when the reality is terrible were never made progress anyways. They just fizzled out. And so he blended those two things. And when you blend those two things, he talks about how the actions that you can take tend to be very productive. Because it's rooted in reality, it's going to fit where you are at that point in time. But because you're optimistic, you are willing to try to take that next step and try to chip away at that next thing, which is also necessary when you're in a bad situation. I would never presume to understand what it's like to be a prisoner of war. But sometimes, like if all of your healthy outlets are something like exercise and an injury happens and that's taken away from you, things can feel pretty bleak, right? And people fear that. People don't want to get into that scenario. But if you are armed with the skills to pull yourself out of injury, you know that you can blend reality, the realism and the optimism and lead to productive action. It really gets to a point where like, yeah, I don't know, this most recent time I got hurt, I had like this like morbid excitement. Like I'm like, I get to document this. This is cool. And yeah, there were definitely people who pointed fingers and stuff. And I knew that would be the case. But I think it's such a shame when people feel trapped by the risk of injury, right? Like imagine if someone wanted to see the world, but they were just terrified of cars and planes.
Yeah.
But they so deeply wanted to see the world. I think that allowing yourself to build the skill of bouncing back from injury, if you have those desires, if you've always wanted to train jiu-jitsu, if you have felt what it's like to not feel safe and want to have that, the benefit of not worrying about that anymore, or at least not worrying as much. Obviously, jiu-jitsu is not like a kung fu movie, right? But there's something very real and very primal about it. And like we were also talking about last night, there's a skill that I think is not talked about enough, and it's just purely being able to execute under extreme duress. That is something that on our day-to-day basis, man, what's extreme duress for me in my daily life? Like I have a program to write before my first client comes in and my son has a blowout. Like that's my extreme duress in my day-to-day. That type of stuff does not prepare you for being able to defend yourself. And if that is something that you worry about, you can address that in a really productive way, to the point where it might be kind of cool if one day that's not even why you train anymore.
Yes.
Because
it's fun. It's a great learning experience. It's good for your brain. It's good, like overall. What I always say, there's so much, but I think when people get worried when they go in, they're just like, well, I'm just going to be really bad. It's like, yeah, you're going to suck.
Yeah.
What's cool though is I remember when I first started, and again, I had a 10-year wrestling background before I started. There was a woman who weighed less than me, and she'd only been training for 6 months, and she whooped me. And that was encouraging for me, because I was like, man, I've got 10 years wrestling, and this 6-month, like one stripe white belt just whooped me.
This stuff must work.
It has to work really well. And it did. And the cool part is it doesn't take that long, because if you're there for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, other new people will join in that time frame. And it's a really unique opportunity for you to be like, oh,
they walk in, they're signing the waiver.
Yeah. You're like, because if you're just continuing to go against the same people, you're going to keep getting whooped. But every now and then someone new will come in, and all of a sudden, like, you feel like, oh, this is what it feels like to be able to impose my will. It's and also to choose like how hard you're going to go, to decide I'm not going to hurt this person, but to know like I can do something. I can take care of myself against the average individual.
The control element's huge too.
Yeah. It's so, and then not to mention, and I don't want anyone to get into a situation, but like we don't always get to choose the situations we find ourselves in. It's like I would rather practice in a situation in which there's padded floors and there's a coach and there's a group of people all with the same stated goal, as opposed to the first time I ever find myself in that situation, God forbid, is on concrete and I've never trained before and I just have no idea what I'm doing.
And you just have to see red.
Yeah.
That's the only option.
Trust me, bro. I see red and they're done. It's it's an amazing experience. I always encourage people to try it. Like I just think it's so important, and I'm excited to get my kids involved in it when they're out there with me all the time, and we're doing jiu-jitsu without me calling it jiu-jitsu.
Oh, it's such a universal thing anyways. It's like that thing of Joe Rogan narrating the bear fight.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's jiu-jitsu. Well, I actually want to bring it back. Something that you said made me think of my kid, but like, I really think that the moment that we get old, truly old, is when we start, when we give in to the fact that we can't be bad at something anymore. Forget this arbitrary age. If you can still, man, look at the people who sign up for something like jiu-jitsu at the age of 60. Those are the people with the crazy, they like, an element of youth just like emanates from them, you know, and they're 60, right? But they're in there, they're like, oh, jiu-jitsu, that looks cool, let me try that. You're like, but you're going to be bad at it. They're like, yeah, of course, I'm trying something new. Though, man, that is youth. Watching my kid when he first was able to take his steps, my wife and I sat across from each other in the living room, and the amount of times that we just kept encouraging him, and he would fall, but like be encouraged, look up at us, like all excited, and do it over again. And he's not like, oh, but I'm not, like, that's his reality.
Yeah.
And we all were like that. That is youth. And we watch our kids, you bring them to, you know, you said that you bring your daughter to gymnastics, right? Like day one, sure, there's like maybe stranger danger and stuff, but like if you're, like she's learning a new skill. She's not even thinking about like, what if I'm bad at this?
She's so excited.
Let me jump into it. We have to like bottle that and keep it. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And whether that's jujitsu, whether that's, I don't know, even getting back into jumping or sprinting, right? People go so long without those things. As a kid, you weren't like to like a recess teacher, like, hey, so what's the perfect technique for hopscotch again? It was none of that. You were like, let me just try it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's huge. I think that keeps us young. I think it's a transferable thing. And a few of the things we've talked about, whether it's fear of injury, whether it's the fear of being bad at something or whatever, we build up these walls and tell ourselves these things that prevent us from doing things that are truly like good and enriching. The more that you smooth that track of actually still doing those things and working through those barriers, the less confining they are. And I think it's just a better way to live. You want to try something new? Go try it. Of course you're going to be bad at it.
Yeah.
You know?
I have a lot more questions, which means we're going to have you back out here for another episode, but I have 2 more questions for today.
Cool.
What are you scared of?
That's a tough one. I shared this with you leading up to coming out here. I think right now I've worked really hard to get myself to a point where like personal life, work life, my own hobbies and endeavors, like I really like where I'm at. And I like the path that I'm on. And I think the first thing that showed me that sometimes that could be taken away is like COVID. And then the next thing is like, you know, having my son and like worrying about things for him. I do get where people, if they have a similar thing, they could like, that could be like crippling. Like, don't take the next risk because this isn't so bad here. Right. Like I do get it. And I think like all through my 20s and stuff, like I'm like, I haven't built anything yet. What would I be scared of? Right. You get to a point where you're more established. And I get it. I do see those little pangs of it. Right. But even talking to you about potentially, if I'm just focusing on the potential downside of like a second kid or whatever, you could be crippled by that. You could get stuck there. or you can weigh both sides. You can look more at the positive side. And I just don't think that it's a way to live where you just focus on the negative. Yeah. So what am I scared of? I mean, I think in some sense, the normal fears like that, if you have a life that you like, you don't want to lose those things. But I think taking consistent steps to not let that rule over my decision-making is big. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's any major fears. Things are pretty good right now.
I like that. I like it. What was the name of the guy who was in the Vietnamese prisoner of war?
Stockdale, James. Don't quote me on James, but the Stockdale paradox.
So it reminds me of that, where it's like you can have this realistic optimism for whatever situation is coming. You can have some level of optimism for it, while also understanding the situation you're in right now. Mm-hmm. Seems like you apply that to your fear as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I encountered the Stockdale paradox or the concept of it a few years ago, and it just resonated because I'm like, oh, in way less eloquent terms, I already believe that.
Yeah. Well, what are you excited about?
Oh, so much. Yeah, every year of business is cool, especially when you're in charge of it yourself, right? Making professional connections like this. In my personal life, man, every new step, with your first kid, I'm sure it's crazy with each of them, but like, for the first time experiencing that, it's
wild.
So exciting. I love sports and human performance, so I am really excited to just expose him to different things like that and see where he wants to go with it. That's super exciting. Also, I've gotten to a place now where I think, I haven't competed in jiu-jitsu since 2017. I would love to get back into it. I never even competed at brown or at black belt, but I did compete at adult a lot in blue and purple. So like it's a big jump. It's something that, again, you could let that barrier keep building, or like, I don't know, dude, I'm the youngest I'm ever going to be like right now, right? If I start competing next year, it's crazy that I'll be Masters 2, but I don't know, maybe I get back in a rhythm and do some adult competitions as well. Like, I don't feel like I have the mileage on this body of like these crazy injuries. Even something like the adductor was a blip. It's gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would also be super excited to get back into competing in jiu-jitsu, trying to stay young, doing the things that a young person would do the things that are scary.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Where can people follow you?
So my Instagram is my name, alex.sterner. And then on YouTube, it's the name of my business, Electrum Performance.
We'll put both of those in the show notes. So cool. Everyone, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Please make sure you go follow Alex. We'll put in the show notes his Instagram, his YouTube. Really, really, as you can tell, incredible guy, unbelievably knowledgeable. I highly encourage you to reach out to him to learn more from him. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you're watching. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. I'll talk to you soon.